Welcome to Warblog. Today we're looking at this Raco scenario, which is a larger part of the, which is a smaller part of the current Afrin activity, which is sort of probably better indicated by this. So here's sort of Afrin district sort of area, northern Syria on the border of Turkey, the Turkish border coming in there. Syrian units currently moving up here, but this is what this scenario is all about. But Raco or Raco is just here. And that's the scenario we're dealing with. There's this small enclave here. We've touched on some other scenarios that sort of are a little nearer to that. I think this is the actual northern parts. This one here, Quaid. I think Raco is the following extension further this way. So they've been moving this way. And if you look at the orientation of that and these units, it's pretty much the same. Here, you know, they're still moving in that line, so they've come down from here. In fact, you probably see a few of these places are sort of the same. The terrain sort of seems to change. It's not so much because it is changing, it's because, you know, the interpretation. I think it's probably more mountainous, but I've settled with this as it is, because I looked at the map, and it doesn't mean it's a smooth desert, but it's flatter and more desert-like than it is hilly and hill-like, and so the X becomes that. But you know, there's not sort of a distinction. I mean, you could almost look at this as being very similar terrain. It just gets more hilly in these areas, clearly. And again, this is not suddenly green, agricultural. Whatnots. One thing to possibly just mention as sort of a general game development, I am sort of toying with the idea, and probably, you know, at some point in existence I will get around to it, of putting in themes. So, because this is what I would call a more European agricultural type thing. So if I had a theme, say basically based on the regions of the Middle East, these would be more yellowy type, orchard type, sort of more arid agricultural hexes, so they would look a little better, and so etc. So I can theme things, so there'll be agricultural hexes, but they'll actually maybe look a bit different. But we're going to sort of jump in and play. Essentially they're moving towards Raco, which is sort of more over here, like this. So we're only just moving to take these hill points and move forward. So I don't want to sort of go too far into all this really, but essentially, obviously, there's the front line here, sort of more like that, and so the whole idea is to obviously move towards these points. So how you do it is really, you know, something else really. I mean, that's the nature of the game. But I think one thing to possibly bear in mind when you're sort of looking at it, well, first thing, we've got the Free Syrian Army, which is sort of more Turkish-backed rebels, Turkish-backed militants. I think there's even got sort of quite a good name for them. Basically, sort of the mouse over. I can't see their mouse over. Yeah, they're basically Turkish-backed militants, and it's sort of interesting really, because there's a lot of talk about, you know, a lot of everything that's happening in the Middle East being proxy wars. By that we mean, you know, these, you know, people would say that these Kurdish elements are actually proxies of the United States, and they would say maybe that these ones are proxies of the Turkish, and especially more over to other areas where there are Iranian proxies and Russian proxies. You know, the Russians are fighting the Americans to some extent, or, you know, I'm not saying they are, but, you know, could be defined like that, with the Russians providing all support. And here what we've got are the Free Syrian Army, who are essentially supported by the Turkish. Now, what's happening with the Turkish units at the moment in Afrin, and it's getting quite heated, I guess. There's more happening than just this little scenario here. But the Turkish forces are taking casualties. And so what that means is, you know, that they're losing manpower. I mean, there's a recent report where the Russians lost about a dozen non-military citizens in an attack, probably over towards Deir Zor area. And, you know, these things become headlines. You know, I mean, you lost 2 American special forces in Mali or Somalia, or Chad area, somewhere in the middle of Africa. And it becomes a sort of thing that the president comments on, and taking casualties, national casualties for these sort of the puppet masters, so to speak, if you can put it like that. It's not what they want. And the Turkish, the casualty rate for the Turkish forces at the moment, I mean, I don't know, but I read a headline and they were saying, well, they've lost 139 since the Operation Olive Branch or whatever it was launched, and but the militants have lost 1,200. So it's 10% of the total, but it's still 139 Turkish, operatives, soldiers, troops, people dead, probably a lot more wounded, and these things are sort of things that I think are key to understanding, how these modern wars are going on, because they don't want to start taking casualties of their own, and so what we've got here is these FSA units in advance. So I don't know whether they're in advance. I didn't put them like that deliberately. To be quite honest, I just sort of, when I deploy things, I just put them in the front line, and then they put the big bulk of them there and the big bulk of the Turkish units there. So it's up to you to decide how you want to deploy them. But it does sort of look, it gives a sort of clearer impression of, well, if we can take the casualties on these, no one really notices. It's not headline news. If you take casualties on the Turkish, then the Turkish, the Turkish sort of government have, news problems or headline problems. I don't really know how to explain it really, but it becomes more, of an issue because they're losing their own troops in, this other war, and I think that should make sense, but. So we can sort of almost see that, but we've definitely got these two levels of activity. No one really knows what's happening, but obviously there's three elements here. I did actually put this one in at the last moment, so it's a bit squeezed in at the top. I thought these were sort of towns, but we're actually going for Raco, which is over here, and I haven't actually put that in, but I hadn't taken it. Basically, they've taken these three sort of. I think the main headline said they've taken these two. And then I realised that there's another one, so I added it over there. So that's why it's sort of focused on these two objectives, and that's why the Turkish units are here and the FSA are there. And essentially, what it boils down to is, how you take it. And obviously, from my point of view, I just looked at it and think, well, it's the. Did I press that? There's a road. And I'm not saying you should take the road, but it would make sense that that's how you would do it, so that you can then move your forces up. These will be blocking forces with the main thrust coming through there. But now we've got this one here, and to be quite honest, you might sort of say, well, how are we going to deal with that? Well, we could sort of you could sort of say, well, we're going to do it like that, so that you can do But you've essentially got to create your front line there. And the main forces are going to come through along this road here. So if we reload that and sort of do those lines with a little more care, you can sort of see that there are these two roads, and taking those two roads, I think, is going to be the way to do it, really. So what I'm going to do first of all, I think, is I'm going to split these forces into two groups to go down each of these roads. I'm going to manoeuvre these to create that blocking line. He'll be on the blocking line as well, so he'll probably move a little closer. But these are just going to be blocking lines. And then I'm going to follow up similarly, dividing these into two battle groups to follow this main force through. I'm not gonna go too far into this. I don't want to spend too long. I mean, the videos get like about 10 or 20 views maximum. So I mean, it's not as though I've never really known that, but I don't really feel compelled to sort of assuming half the views are probably me, to sort of play through to the end. It's just an overview on the game. I mean, a lot of these videos are really sort of designed to sort of give the impression, to give you something to look at and think, oh, hang on, I could do that better. type thing. I find them interesting to watch anyway. But so I'm going to try and split these forces up. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's 5 and 6, let's say. I'm going to send the 6 over here because there's a less scope for flexibility on this. I think it's going to be easier to swing if I need anything extra over here than it is over here, because this is the more central, this is the more offset. So, all right. Yeah, I've got this problem again now. It's the same thing with. I've had this before. I can't move anything. And I should have picked this up because I can't move my. If I try to move the tab, so I'm going to have to shut Firefox down. So I'm going to pause, and if I do that, it's going to. Yeah, if I do that, it's going to stop the screen recorder, and that's that. So I'm going to leave it at that. It gives me a nice opportunity to create just a 10-minute video, because to be quite honest, I'm a bit pushed for time, and I just sort of wanted to play it, but I find that when I get into playing them, it's so easy to just sit there for an hour, up towards 50 minutes, and yeah, I just can't move. I'm trying to click. I wonder why that is doing that. I use the. I've got a little thing on the. What's it? Well, that doesn't do anything. I'm not sure whether it should. Okay, so anyway, that I'm not gonna worry too much about that. But essentially, it shouldn't be that difficult. But these Kurds have quite a lot of hardware, and the thing is, what I wanted to sort of do with this, or reflect in this, was the sort of the slow pace of the advance, because it is quite slow. And I think what the Turkish people, well, the operation is trying to achieve is to minimise casualties, which is probably why it's going quite slowly. But one of the things is that they are equipped with these, and this is going back quite a while when I did this actually. They are equipped with these sort of anti-tank systems. And I quit saying, they don't grow on trees. You don't make those in a workshop. So, and to be quite honest, there's probably only a few places they could have got those from. And, so that's quite significant. And they're pretty good against tanks, but only when tanks are on their own. But we've got quite a lot of tanks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tank companies, and some, mechanised units which they'll work against. And so, really want to be getting these caught on their own. So this is where these FSA units will come into play to sort of create the sort of blocking lines to stop these from just lunging out and attacking the armoured forces, so to speak. But they do have quite a lot in there. So we've got air defence. So again, taking in the Turkish air power will, I think they've shot down a plane or two or things like that. Maybe it's more the Israeli side of things, but looking through, we've got irregulars, we've got artillery, and then that's another thing that is ongoing. I mean, no matter how superior the Turkish forces are against these units, if they've got artillery, you're going to be taking inbound fire, which will be, suppressing people at the very least, and causing damage and casualties. And that's probably where a lot of the casualties come from. I mean, I don't know, because I imagine a lot of the casualties come from sort of the close urban fighting. But if there's not a lot of that going on, I mean, the artillery is, fairly key. So, when I was talking about, things being slow, I think, it's fairly key to sort of understand, the imperative balance between airstrikes and artillery, and actually engaging on a ground level, because, you could, in theory, you could just sit there, using the air power against this stack and the Turkish artillery, which has a little longer range, I think. I'm not sure. They're all the same range, but they've only got one, and they've got three 3 artillery companies, and so we could position these maybe there to just keep pounding this hill area. Now I think the Kurds will probably disperse these units, and I can't drag anything, obviously. You know, they're only stacked there and there in the same way that these are stacked there, so you can start deploying them as you want. But even so, the whole idea that you could just sort of sit there, as I would expect you to sort of do, exchanging artillery and committing, you know, airstrikes onto, you know, whatever stack you're trying to sort of reduce. You can only do that for so long, because there comes a balance between the amount of artillery that damage that you're receiving inbound, as you know, in balance against how much you're inflicting outbound, so to speak. And so, you know, you might want to spend, say, 3 or 4 turns, but at some point you're going to have to sort of say, okay, well, we've got to send these troops in, we're going to commit these mechanised units, and somehow, you know, feel confident enough to use the armoured units. And you can't really sort of cherry pick. So, but the thing is, you've got air defence units which are going to sort of hamper the air power slightly. We've got these anti-tank units which are going to target these things. We've got irregulars which are fairly flexible and dynamic in that they can move through zones of controls, and they can target, especially these small FSA units, quite effectively. Now they'll be in hills, but they should be able to get. It's only going to sort of like put them up up to 3, so they'll be able to get a 1-to-1 against them. And if they can get more of them, you know, maybe a bit more. And plus they've got these, you know, their infantry units are 3-3s, which means that they're pretty sort of pretty tough in these hills, and you know, quite formidable, and they can defend themselves. I mean, you know, a couple of these infantry units could possibly take out one of these FSA units, but these FSA units are, you know, they're 2-2s as opposed to 3-3s. It's a very subtle and minor difference, but it sort of adds up when you think of their screening forces are quite tough in their own right. And so when you start to balance all that up, it's quite an intricate scenario. I'm not going to take it any further than that, just because, you know, I've got other things to do. But hopefully you don't have a stupid computer like I do that consistently just stops doing. It's nothing to do with the game. I keep saying that. I keep thinking I'm just being defensive, but I can't move tabs around. I should have figured that one out. I just can't drag them. I figured out how to do this before, and I think I just shut Firefox down. But obviously the video ago then. So anyway, I'm going to upload that. Apologies for the inconvenience of not being able to move any troops. If it's the first time you're watching, the game definitely works, and it's awesome. And yeah, you can sign up and you can play it, and the units will move, I promise. And you can have lots of fun. I don't promise about that, but it's definitely entertaining. And I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.